Здравейте! I'll switch in English just because I expect that not everybody here is speaking Bulgarian. So, I'm Elena, lead recruitment advisor at Questers, and I'm really happy that you're here this evening because I'm quite sure that you take a lot from this talk. And why I am so sure? Just because today's speaker is Svetlin. He's one of the star engineers of NewsUK in Bulgaria. He's the principal engineer at the company, one of the first employees of the company here. And he's not just technically excellent, but he's also very inspirational team member, let's say. But let me stop here. He'll take on now. Just be aware that after the talk, you'll of course have the opportunity to drop a message and ask questions or have a fruitful discussion with him.
Hello, I'm Svetlin, and today we're going to talk about multi-factor authentication and the way to do it easily and extensively with Auth0. This is a topic that has been very recent for us in NewsUK, but very important for us nonetheless, because we have a project, the one that I worked in, the SunSavers project, that deals with quite a lot of sensitive information because we deal with money, and this one requires our users to have the most secure way to authenticate that they're who really they are. And this has led us to search for several solutions to ensure our top security on the authentication, and Auth0 has provided an excellent solution for us, which I'm going to show you in this presentation. But before we start with the multi-factor authentication, let's talk about the most common way to authenticate our users, the one that we're very used to and we take for granted that possibly 100% of the sites and apps at the moment are offering, which is the password authentication. And while this is very easy and it works, there are several problems with it that kind of have led the industry to introduce different ways to authenticate. One of the problems with password is that we tend to use weak passwords, and that's by our nature, because back in the day when there were no password managers, people are basically remembering their passwords, and it's much easier to remember something that you know, and it's something related to yourself. It could be a date, it could be a person who's close to you, it could be some of your favorite animals, or the city that you grew up in. And these are weak passwords nowadays because we have so much power, so much compute that can use machine learning and some mining of our online presence to kind of break that. We have also dictionary attacks, because many people still, even if they do not use passwords that are related to themselves, they use password 123 or some common passwords that are so easily crackable by some simple dictionary attacks. Another problem with passwords is that while a password can be weak or not, if we use the same password everywhere, if some system is compromised, then this password is not good, even if it's some very long hash. For example, LinkedIn and PlayStation and several other big players got hacked back in the day, and some of them didn't even hash the password. So basically, these passwords were forever compromised. And if people do not change them in the other places that they use, often these passwords may be the password of their email, and this gives access to basically all the places that this email is used. Another problem that actually I'm very guilty of myself is that we use the same passwords forever, and this is again a human nature. Basically, if you have something that works, you tend to never change it. Basically, you set the password. You might use a password manager. It could be 100 characters long hash, and you think it might be unbreakable, and it might really be, but you don't know how this password is stored. And if you use it forever, if you don't rotate it, then at some point, one or more of these systems can get compromised, and these passwords can no longer be the very safe password that you're used to. Modern password managers offer in their paid solutions offer password rotations, which is a very nice thing. And even if we do not automate that, it should be some kind of a security hygiene for the users to do that regularly, meaning like once 6 months or once a year. And if it's done easy enough by the providers of these services, it would be even nicer. With all these problems, even if you do not see yourself in any of these categories, we have one of the most common ones, insecure password storage. So basically, you have strong passwords, they're different on all sites. You rotate them regularly, but you store them in a text file on your desktop. Or like my mother, in a textbook on the couch. And the problem with this is that these are easily gettable. I mean, not necessarily for for the passwords in the couch, but if you store them in your desktop and you get some virus or a worm, it could easily leak these to the outside world. So the problem with passwords are evident, but still we use that because this is the most convenient one. And I'm not saying that we should stop using them. These are effective way to authenticate. And the thing is, do we really have an alternative? I mean, if it's easy enough, if people are used to it, and it's been 30 plus years of people using that as their method to authenticate, how would we teach them to use something else? Do we really have an alternative? And the answer is yes, we do, but it will take some time. And the problem actually is not in the password themselves, even though we talk about that, there are several issues. The problem is that we use a single way to authenticate, and it's a single point of failure. So in essence, basically the problem is not in the way to authenticate, but how many factors, how many ways we provide for that authentication. And this leads us to kind of the solution to all that, or seemingly the solution, and that's the multi-factor authentication. It's a very common way to authenticate users by providing at least two pieces of evidence that it's them who they say they are. And if it's done by the best practice, it should come at two different parts of this diagram. So it should come as something they know, for example, a password, like we used to, and maybe something they have, like a phone number, like a phone with Google Authenticator or SMS on it. Or it could be even modern version of it with some biometric fingerprint, retina, or facial scan. And if you provide more than one, this is considered multi-factor authentication. So let's talk about each of them. The most common one is something that we know. This is the passwords that we use. In many cases, this is the PIN codes because it's much easier to remember a 4-digit code. And sometimes personal details are used. I was very surprised recently. We have an insurance provider that set up some accounts for us, and the default password for the account was actually the national number for the user. Well, this information is kind of private. You give that away in several places, so it might be compromised, even though they request that to be changed. For PIN codes, again, this is something that's usually related to dates or specific numbers of our lives. On the part of the user, that's fine. Take care of that. But let's talk about the provider. That's the apps and the sites that we use. It's so popular to implement these methods of authentication because the complexity to integrate it on the provider, it's very low. It's so easy to integrate. You just need basically an if statement saying if the password is that, compare it to the database and log the user in. And it's much easier to store that because it's just plain passwords. It's strings of text. Whether a database or some other solutions, storing text is easy. It's scalable, it's fast, it works. And it's much easier even now with all these big providers of social platforms like Facebook and Google and LinkedIn, providing OAuth solutions with a single sign-on. Basically, we don't even need to manage the password storage. We just accept a token and rely that the user is who they are. And Facebook confirms that they really are. The problems with these methods, the one that we know, are mostly the ones that we outlined in the first slide. It's weak passwords or other pieces of information that can easily be deducted. Even if the attacker doesn't know exactly what our password is, nowadays we have so much online presence that with the modern compute, it's really easy to mine that information. And on top of that, some people are not quite used to recognizing a valid email from a phishing email, and they provide their passwords voluntarily, which is really bad. But I've had friends do that, and it's not nice. Let's go to the other one, the factors that we have, or basically the pieces of information that we possess. These are a little bit more private. They're much easier to have rather than remember a password or rely on a password manager. It's something that we own. We can touch that. For example, a mobile device or a USB key, some smart card keys, which is common for the banking sector. And these are much closer to us and in a way much harder for the attacker to get. It's much easier for a computer virus or some other software or a phishing attack to get something digital like a password, but it's much harder for us to lose our phones, for example, now that we're all working from home. On the provider side, the complexity is a little bit bigger than the first set of factors. Basically, implementing a solution to validate a password, as I mentioned, in the simplest terms means just an if statement. But for having authentication through mobile devices, USB keys, and smart cards, this is much more difficult to integrate because we don't have a common standard for it. Yes, we have Google Authenticator, we have FIDO keys, and all sorts of standards that are trying to emerge and kind of take the crown for it. But still, it's way more ways to integrate than just a simple password validation. And for each of this integration, it means that you support only a single piece of a factor. For example, if you support Google Authenticator but you don't support email validation, basically some users might not be used to it, and you're losing these users because they're used to another factor. While with passwords, it's much common. And whether it's a PIN-based or a password-based, people just tap it in. The problem with these types of factors is actually the problems with passwords themselves. What happens if you lose them? For a password, you usually have a forgot your password, and unless it's compromised and used in your email address, you always have the backup of your email address, and you can go and recover it. For lost devices, the problem here is that most of the ways to recover this access is through recovery codes, which we're going to take a look in just a little bit. And recovery codes is something that most users are not used to storing. So basically, when you register a factor, you're given a set of codes, you should store them, but people never do, or most people never do. And when you lose your phone, well, tough luck. Another one that's not very common anymore because technology has evolved is SIM hijacking. It used to be very popular when there wasn't so many users that use Google Authenticators. It was mostly SMS-driven validation of the phone. and some carriers were prone to SIM hijacking. Basically, the attacker could duplicate the SIM and allow another phone to receive the actual code. The third circle that we saw in the diagram is something that we are, and this is possibly the best authentication mechanism, because this is something that's even more intimate to us. This is our fingerprints, our retinas, basically any biometric characteristics that's pretty much unique to us. And these are complex features that are unique and much more difficult to fake. Unfortunately, this is not very easy to implement on the provider side. So the complexity here is really high. A fingerprint scan, while it's seemingly easy, requires huge algorithms to process and store this information. And for each of these biometrics, you require a different integration method, similar to the previous slide. So basically, it's much more development-intensive task, and it's not very popular at the moment. I know for sure that Chrome is looking forward to having that standardized in some way. Actually, a year ago, they started supporting Touch ID on the macOS, and I believe they're trying to open a standard for this biometric to be used in a similar way that passwords are used. And with this user experience, it might get bigger adoption, but so far it's not wildly popular. And the problem with that mainly is because most of these systems are imperfect by nature, basically because all these biometric pieces of information are complex. They're difficult to validate, and they're prone to having fraudulent biometric data. Basically, you have a fingerprint, but someone might scan it, make a copy of it, and that basically can trick the system. For example, touch sensors nowadays use not only a light to see whether this finger is reflecting in the same way, but they also go through the skin and see whether there's blood pumping there. So basically, you know, it's a live finger, not a photo. But still, I mean, they're imperfect as of now, and maybe at some point they'll have a bigger percentage of confidence. And of course, on the user side, there's the privacy concerns, because nowadays everything is about privacy, and people believe that taking their biometric data is kind of stealing their identity. And while in some cases it might very well be true, in most systems, the actual biometrics are not stored. They're tokenized, and basically a token representation of these pieces of information are stored. But of course, people don't know that, and they complain always about that. Unfortunately, with all these problems, we really don't have a way to fix any of these. These are mostly user-related problems, and it's more reliant on actually a group effort and a tendency of the users to kind of learn and adapt and start using these. What we can do, however, is combine these. And this is like, many people think that this is kind of the silver bullet of it all. It has drawbacks on each of these factors, but if you combine them, there's a solution. It doesn't matter the drawbacks. Unfortunately, that's not the truth, because for many people, it's exactly the user experience that causes the issue with multi-factor authentication. For many users, it's just one too many steps. If you're used to just typing your password, and now you have one more step. You have to go to your phone and look at the 6-digit code, try to enter it, and that's way too much for some people. Then we have the latency of that second factor. A password validation is pretty fast. You type in the password, and unless the password, the provider is very clogged in terms of traffic, you should get a response right away or in a matter of a second. But for the verification calls, this usually relies on some providers of phone services, or it might be something else that requires transport to your device. So basically a latency is expected, but people are used to the swiftness of password validation and where's my code? They usually have that. And you click on the resend button a couple of times and then you kind of give up on all these second factor authentication because verification codes unfortunately take time to deliver. And then we talked about the recovery codes a couple of slides ago. This is a real problem. I mean, for many people, saving a password, it could be something that their password manager does, or they might even remember it themselves if it's something that's not hash-based. But for recovery codes, where do you save them? Do you save them in a text file on your desktop? Not the very best way. Do you save them in your notebook? Yeah, but if you leave for home and you need that somewhere, or if it gets stolen, I mean, recovery codes are a piece of information that's not exactly password. It's not exactly a factor, but yeah, it allows you to recover this, something that we used to having that in our emails. Unfortunately, there's no proven way to do it otherwise, and so far people are not used to saving recovery codes, at least most of the people. Another one is adding and managing factors, and this was touched upon in the complexity sections of each of these segments. Basically, you have different integration methods for each of these factors. And unfortunately, this means that site A might provide Google Phone authentication as a second factor. And site B might say, okay, well, I don't want to support that. I'll support facial recognition. And people are used to having something that's very strict and repeatable in their lives. And if they're used to saving a password, they would want the second factor to be of the very same kind for every site or app. And if every site and app provides a different way to do it, because we currently do not have a standard, then we have a problem. People are just not used to changing. And these are kind of the problems with the multi-factor authentication, but does it mean that we should not use them? I mean, these are mostly user-related problems. These are problems of the user experience. And if we consider that we don't have any solution to solve that, we can't teach every user how to do it and how to adapt to this learning curve, then let's do it in the most easy way for us, the developers, basically the providers of these services. Because the increased security for our users is a top priority, and if some users accept it and use it, good for them. We've given our best efforts. And as I mentioned in the previous slides, it's a lot of integration, a lot of ways to do it. And this sometimes requires a lot of engineers with different skill sets to integrate. In our project at SunSavers, we decided to use something that's platform as a service, which is Auth0. And what it does is it allows you to set up multi-factor authentication in a much easier way, much more scalable and much more secure. And it's plain easy. They provide a lot of factors out of the box. And actually that's the beauty of the platform as a service. You don't need to take care of all these integrations. At some point, some factor or some standard might emerge. And because many of the Auth0 users might require it or might make a request for it, they'll add support. And this means you'll get it out of the box. I've listed here some of the factors that are very popular, and Auth0 supports them out of the box with a very minimal configuration, like FIDO security keys and biometric scans, which I believe are going to be become, if not right now, the standard for physical USB keys validation. We have a one-time password, which is done through Google Authenticator standard. We have phone message where you can provide your users with the very plain one of receiving a simple message on their phone. We have email validation. We have the recovery code that we talked about. And we have some custom security providers, which means that Auth0 have decided to listen to their users and say, okay, some of our users are using dual security. That's a password manager that allows you to have factors in your phone through their app, usually with a push notification that has a allow and deny, which is much easier than typing a 4 or 6 digit code. We use a similar tool here, Auth0, and through the app, you just type approve and the app takes care of the rest. The centralized management is so good and well, but what sets it apart is actually the adaptive risk-based management. So basically, it allows you to turn on multi-factor authentication given a specific factor. Basically, if the user is of a specific type, maybe some metadata, like they clicked too many times on a certain button or something, it could be related to their geolocation. For example, you know that your app is used in a certain region, and then you get some users outside of this region. And this is done out of the box, and this works very well, especially for the user metadata. You kind of can do all sorts of stuff to really customize the multi-factor authentication challenge. So now we're gonna see how it's set up. Basically, there are two ways to set it up. The easy way, so to speak, the out-of-the-box way with Auth0. And then we're going to see how you can really customize it to your site or app and basically allow this experience to be elevated and people to feel like it's really part of the app and not some third-party system. So the first step is to actually turn on the multi-factor authentication. And this is done in the Auth0 panel. Basically, you have a tenant, basically a set of applications that are in your account. And on this menu, you have a security menu that carries all the options for turning MFA on. Basically, you need to do three things. You need to select all the factors that you want to support. And this allows you to basically support the factor and configure it. You need to see whether some additional configuration might be required. For example, if you want to send SMS messages, you need to provide details about who's going to send it. You might have your own provider, or you might have Auth0 send them for you. Then you can customize the actual methods to be used. For example, for SMS, it could be sent as a text, or it could be sent as a voice message with someone dictating the number to you. And then, of course, if you send them over with text, you can customize that as well. And this is done all through the administration panel. There is not a single piece of code that you need to write for that piece of functionality. And then the last piece of this first step is to configure the policy. Basically, you can turn off MFA, for example, if people are complaining about it, or if there's something that you need to tweak, you can turn it back on with the always option. And you can use this adaptive way to do it, which I just mentioned is a very nice way to custom tailor it to your audience. The second step is to tell Auth0 where this multi-factor challenge should be triggered, and this is done through flows. Flow is a user journey that happens on your site. So basically, you can have a login journey or a login flow. You can have a registration flow. You can have a forget your password flow. You can have other flows that are related to user activities that are custom to you, and you can specify them in Auth0. And they're represented, as you can see on the right, with a very simple diagram that shows how the user goes through this journey. When you see this flow, you can attach an action, which is basically a trigger point where this MFA multi-factor authentication should be used. So, for example, if the user is logged in, they enter their password, and Auth0 verifies that and says, okay, this user is verified. You can say, okay, before this is completed, before we send the user back to the site, Let's see if they really are who they are with the challenge of a second factor. And this action, which you can see at the bottom, is a very simple JavaScript function. It receives an event and an API. And basically an event is just details about the actual user. So you can customize that adaptive functionality that I talked about. So for example, you can say, I don't want any users of that birth date, for example, to use it. And the API is the actual Auth0 API. So basically, it allows you to trigger the actual multi-factor challenge, and that's as simple as this line of code on line number 8 there on the diagram. And after this action is executed, the user will be prompted to enter the code from their second factor. Of course, you can have the users that do not have factors, and basically with some conditional logic, you can trigger this on demand. The actual registration of a factor is done through a system that's called Auth0 Guardian, and it has 3 endpoints. It's possibly the only piece of code that you have to write in order to integrate the out-of-the-box solution for Auth0. So basically, you have a post endpoint, a get endpoint, and a delete endpoint. The purpose of the post endpoint is to give you an URL, and that's all it does. The actual URL that you receive is called an enrollment URL, and it allows the user to set up their factor. And basically, you need to get that URL and redirect the user, and it's redirected in an Auth0 template. Basically, it would not look like your site, but as I mentioned, it's something that you have out of the box. You don't need to code anything here. Of course, after it's set up and ready, you should provide a way for your user to manage these registration. They might need to remove them at some point. The second and third endpoints here, the get and the delete, provide exactly that. The get enrollments will give you a list of the current enrollments, and you can have a toggle next to them. And the delete one, of course, can delete an authenticator if the user no longer requires them. Multi-factor authentication doesn't support updates. It's done for security reasons, and basically, in order for you to change your phone number, you delete the authenticator and you re-register it again. You can't update that. Of course, as I mentioned, everything happens on Auth0. And while this is, as I said, almost code-free on the provider side, still Auth0 provides you a way to do it within their domain. And this is done through the branding section in their admin panel. It allows you to turn on this toggle, customize MFA page, and provide some piece of customization to this page, like logo and colors and maybe some formatting, maybe some custom text. You're kind of limited in this editor. You don't have much ability to use third-party packages or provide some complex JavaScript, because this is just a simple HTML. But still, it's much easier to do it if you go the out-of-the-box route to provide a nice experience for the user without much complication on the development side. Then, if you're not satisfied with that, if you want the more perfected example and have the users do not realize that they're using a third-party system, as if you are building it yourself, you can really do it by integrating the full-featured multi-factor authentication API of Auth0. So basically, all the functionality that Auth0 is going to wrap it in their interface with a little customization is available through a set of endpoints. There's a first step to it that's different than the first step that we saw. And because each application has a set of grants, a set of features that you allow your users to use, in order for us to communicate with the multi-factor authentication API, we need to provide 2 grants, a password grant and an MFA grant. The password grant is used because Auth0, in order for it to provide you a token to allow you to work with the user details on the multi-factor authentication side, it needs to verify the user. And the password grant allows you to request the username and password for a user and send it and receive a token against that identity and use that token to query the multi-factor authentication API on behalf of the user. And of course, the MFA grant is just to provide you with the necessary scope to enroll the users, to read their authentication status, and more. The first thing that happens is that you need to get that token. And as I mentioned before, it requires on the UI side of things to request the username and the password from the user. They give it to you, and you need to specify the audience as the Auth0 MFA audience. This will give you the ability to get a token to be used against the MFA API and not the regular Auth0 API, which is again on the same endpoint OAuth token. Then we have the client ID secret. These are related to the application that you have. The grant type password is, of course, because you're requesting the username and password. And optionally, you can specify all the scopes that you need against the token. The ones that I've outlined there on line 8 are all the possible ones. If you think that you just need to read the authenticators and you don't need a token with the rest, you can just limit it to just that. And the response itself is pretty simple. You get a token, and this token is used against the multi-factor authentication API across all endpoints of Auth0. The location is written there. This is the management API. They don't call it MFA API. It's called the management API, but the scope gives you access to these 5 endpoints, basically. You have the ability to get enrolled authenticators. It's a get endpoint and gives all the enrolled authenticators for a given user. You can enroll an authenticator, and the first snippet that I've sent is basically an enrollment. It tells you what kind of authenticator it is. OOB is abbreviation of a phone authenticator, and to tell you in what way should this be done. So it could be done in SMS, voice, or email. And then you have either the phone number or the email, depending on the type of channel you've chosen. And then you have the confirmation, which basically allows you to send the code that's being received on the channel, and this will confirm the authenticator. You have a delete authenticator as well, and an interesting one that's only available for going with the custom journey is the challenge authenticator endpoint. And this allows you something that's very specific to your application. This is something that we use in SunSavers. Basically, if you use the out-of-the-box Auth0 solution, you have, I believe, 5 or 6 flows that you can attach multi-factor authentication to. Usually it's done on the login or maybe in the registration. But in Savers, we have a cash out page where you can cash out certain amounts of money out of your wallet account. And this is something that's very custom to our application. It's something that Auth0 could not possibly offer out of the box. And the challenge authenticator endpoint allows you to attach multi-factor authentication in any part of your website. So we've attached it to the cash out, and basically before you cash out, you should really confirm that this is really you and not someone that left their browser open with their session open as well. So these are basically all the APIs that Auth0 allows you to use to provide multi-factor authentications to your user. And it's done really easily with a couple of REST calls. The documentation is really nice, and I believe you can really do it in a couple of weeks. We've already done it. It's pending a release, and we're really looking forward to seeing not exactly how it works, because it's really well done and proven, but more so about the user experience and see whether users are going to be adopting that or they're going to sticking with the plain old password, which has been our friend until it breaks by some security breach. So thank you for listening to this presentation. And I hope you stay safe with the multi-factor authentication, because it really is the next step to feeling more secure on the web and everywhere else. Thank you.
So now it's the best time for you to ask questions. As I said, you can drop a message here. Do you see the Q&A functionality? Come on, don't be shy. You can ask anything our expert now. He'll be really happy to answer everything, because he was so enthusiastic to prepare for this evening. Just a sec, there is a question. Svetlin, wait a bit to define the question clearly. Sorry. Okay, since you have worked with Auth0 for some time now, what are the major pros and cons compared to Okta or some newcomers like FrontEgg? Can you make a demo?
Well, I was about to do a demo, but the thing is, Auth0 in their default plan, in their personal plan, has quite a few restrictions. And I didn't want to do it on the company account, because it might leak some sensitive information about the actual setup. In terms of Okta versus Auth0, I'm not really sure. I haven't worked with Okta in that way. We have a simple Okta integration in terms of using their single sign-on solution, but we haven't done any research on whether it's a viable solution for multi-factor authentication. In answer to the first part of the question, the pros of Auth0 are mostly just the out-of-the-box solution. As I mentioned, the first method of integration can really take a day to implement. It's really a matter of a couple of REST calls and just configuring the template. It allows you to set up everything very easily, and the presence of dual security really surprised me, because it's not a very common system. And since you mentioned Okta, at some point I believe that Auth0 might provide Okta integration, and it will allow you to have a similar experience with Okta if you use that instead of Duo. I think the drawbacks of Auth0 might be cost. I really haven't dealt with the whole billing of the system, but usually systems with such a large array of functionality cost per use, rather than a fixed monthly billing. And I believe that for small projects, it might not be might not be worth it. It's similar to the topic where you should host your site on a server or put it in the cloud. I mean, the cloud is much more powerful. It allows you to do all sorts of stuff. But if you're a small site and you go on Amazon, your monthly bill might be way larger than hosting it on DigitalOcean or another smaller company with servers. Same with Auth0. It might be just related to cost. But in terms of drawbacks, I haven't seen anything in the dashboard that doesn't work or doesn't quite fit our needs. It's actually much more than that. We set on a journey to provide this multi-factor authentication in a much simpler way. We're just providing phone message. And if you go and see the configuration options for phone message, basically you can really delve into the customization. You can define providers, you can define templates. It's much nicer experience that I thought it was.
Thank you. There is one more question. Are there any surprises or difficulties during the integration?
Yeah, for some reason, and I would say that this is a current situation. Maybe it will be better in the future, but some of the functionality was not documented, which is a little bit strange to say because their documentation is excellent as is, but there's some features that we really saw by posting some requests to the endpoints, and the responses were a little bit updated. I believe that maybe they need to update their documentation more often. This is possibly the only surprise that we had. And that might not be a really bad thing because after all, even if you develop strictly by the documentation, at some point you have to do some integration or contract tests, and this will reveal any discrepancy between the documentation and the actual implementation. And these were very minor differences. Possibly they need to just version their documentation better.
Okay, anybody else? We don't see you, so you don't really need to be shy. In case something comes to your mind later, of course, you can always come back to us, or especially Svetlin. I'm more than sure he'll be happy to answer. There seems to be no questions at the moment. So if this is the case, then we all wish you a nice evening. Enjoy the rest of the Gypsy summer. And as I said, we remain at your services. Just a sec, maybe something. Yeah, there is one more question. Do you see in the future services like Auth0 have integration with services like Mozilla Password Manager and VPN?
Yeah, I believe that this is something that they might be planning. But as I mentioned, it's a service that shows a lot of documentation, and it's really well laid out. But for some reason, at least when I was going through the site and kind of looking around and researching this solution, it didn't quite show a roadmap. It would have been nice if such a big service provides some kind of idea on how things are looking in the future. I believe, for example, in some of the cloud systems that we use, AWS provides a roadmap on several features that they're planning, even if they're not currently implemented. And it would be nice to see that with Auth0. It might be present, but I haven't really found any type of roadmap attached to their website.
Thank you. Anybody else? You have a last chance. If not, okay. Where do you keep the users? At Auth0 or your database?
Yeah, so this is something that I didn't touch upon in this presentation because it's a little bit out of the scope of multi-factor authentication, but basically Auth0 provides a way to connect to your source. It could be database, it could be an API, it could be some other form. Basically, you have a custom dialog that you can write JavaScript code and basically connect to any source. Or if it's a simple API, you can give it the endpoints to it. In our case, we have a API that provides users, and this is basically the source for each of the applications. This is for identifying the user through their password, basically. The multi-factor authentication, however, the details are not stored with us, which is I believe something that's done because they need to have a stricter control over that data. So basically, if you have a user A with some password, this piece of information, the username and the password, are going to be stored at your data store. And the multi-factor authentication for that user, let's say they enroll their phone number, this piece of information is stored with Auth0. And there are APIs in the Auth0 management API that allows you to receive that information. So if you need to manage it outside of their administration panel, because at the moment, if you have a user that, for example, they forgot their recovery codes or they never got it and they lost their phone, how would you reset their factor? You do that through the Auth0 dashboard, and they give you that functionality with an API call as well. But the actual piece of information is in their domain.
Thank you, Svetlin. Let's wait a bit in case some other question comes. I have to admit that as a non-technical person, I didn't expect to be interested in this, but it was quite cool, actually. I listened to everything you said, and I will try to, how should I say, follow best practices and not be so impatient when I see these many boxes that I need to fill. Yeah.
It's a long journey, unfortunately, and
Yeah.
people are used to that when they're enforced. Usually in banking solutions, you can't do any active operations without that, and people are fine with it because they need to do their whatever they want to do. But for sites or apps that they're required without any specific reasons, people are just reluctant to do it. So yeah, it will take time.
Exactly as me. Yeah.
I believe it's gonna take much better adoption once the third category, something that we are becomes much more error resilient, and basically allow the providers to integrate, for example, facial or a retina or a voice recognition in a much easier way. We used to doing that in our phones, and if this is done on the web, it's going to be great.
For sure. I don't know, maybe now it's safe to say goodbye and stay safe.
Yeah.
So thank you all for being here. As I said, I really hope and I'm sure that it was useful for us. As I said, once again, we remain at your services. Enjoy the evening and stay safe once again.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.